Welcome back, everybody, for our final unit of the course, Unit 7, where we're going to tie it all together. Going to do a brief recap of what we've done, and then talk a little bit about the project, which will be due at the end of this week, and then your final paper, which will be your final exam. So at the beginning of the course, we started with a in-person lecture for those who could make it. We talked about predictive modeling and how to think about how to protect things from harm. And you've been doing that all along. I know that we mentioned it in the beginning, but all along you've been thinking about, where do I put devices? Where do I put barriers? Where do I put things? And you're predicting why you need to put it there because you're predicting what someone might do to harm you. So you've been using predictive modeling all along, and it's a great skill set to start to hone. There'll be changes, as you know, when budgets change and environments change, you need to make changes. But predictive modeling is one of the great skills of security and security management and physical security management. So you've really been doing it all along, and you've done very well at it. In our first unit, we talked about definitions. We talked about CPTED. We did some planning. We talked about depth and defense and the concept of the concentric rings, the onion, if you will, of physical security. How you look at things in a full depth scenario as opposed to just trying to protect one side of a building and another. We went then to the purely physical. We talked about locks, bollards, fences, lights, the stuff that's relatively cheap and highly effective. And we really went into lock sets and types because I think it's a skill set that a lot of security professionals really just don't have. It's one of those things you kind of pick up along the way. But if you know about it to start with, putting in the right lock is something. If you can put in the right lock and you know what it does, you may not need other devices to protect an area. So it's a really good skill set to have. We also talked about access control. We talked about electronic access control, the basics of how these systems work, right? With a head end and a panel and the reader and who talks to what and what does, what it does to open and close a door and what it does for history. So you learned the basics of access control. Some of you knew a fair amount about that simply from using your system at school or other places. But it's always a good refresher and to look at access control in a real generalized way, so you understand the basics of how any system can work. So when you get to your first workplace, you may have a system that's a different model. It may have a few different features, but you understand how every basic part works, and that's the long and short of it. Then we talked about how those systems can fail you and some of the nuances and limitations. We went on to talk about video surveillance and how video systems have evolved from the very basic movie projectors of the 1920s onto the bank cameras, those big giant cameras you see hanging places, onto the more technical and very highly specialized cameras that you see today. And in fact, if you look at that Axis catalog that I sent you or any other manufacturer's catalog, you'll see that there's a camera for every application these days. Very, very technical. So we talked about that and the evolution of those cameras. We also talked about limitations, and it's the one thing that I really want you to take away is that everybody believes that cameras work like they do on TV, that from a half mile away, you can just keep hitting enhance, 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 and you will get a close-up of the license plate number on a vehicle that half-mile distance. It doesn't work that way. These things work on pixels, so putting in the right camera and understanding what the limitations of that camera are when you suggest putting it up are very important. We went on again to talk about biodigital devices, facial recognition, fingerprint readers, hand geometry, other biodata. One student brought up there's one that does body odor, individual body odor that can link to a person. But then we also talked about, as fancy as those things are, they're also very costly still. I really wanted to bring them up in this course because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll be working in this field. I will not. I'll be off fishing somewhere, hopefully. And when you're doing that, biodigital devices will be the norm. They are rapidly becoming more available, and more places are putting them in. But standard card readers, normally proximity readers, are really the norm today. And because of the cost, those costs will come down, just like the very first home computer costs, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for a Commodore kind of computer, right? They're very expensive. Those costs have come down where you can get yourself a laptop for $200 now. So the big thing, though, to consider is the privacy concerns, the different privacy laws, the GDPR, the California Consumer Protection Act, HIPAA Act, other acts that are law and you must obey as a security manager, and you must understand when you put in, especially video systems, but also biodigital systems that are going to collect personally protected information. We went through procedures in the last week or so. Procedures are the way that you solidify your program. You can put all the devices in the world up to protect, but if your people don't use them right, they become highly ineffective. If you put up a card reader and one person runs their card and 20 other employees come through that door, you really have cut the value of that device by 20. So procedures are extremely important, and hopefully you'll learn the value of writing procedures from a template, which is pretty easy to do once you have a template and you can devise your own, and you stick with it. You have the consistency, and it's easy to socialize those policies when they're consistent like that and cover all the basics of why you're doing something with a happy spin on it. To tie that all together, we have our project. It's really an opportunity to show what we know. It's great practice for the future for those of you who are going into this field as a full-time occupation, or perhaps if you're a cyber or a safety major, you may have security working alongside of you. You may report to the security department. You may have the security department report to you. But understanding how physical security devices work, many of them are automated systems, so therefore the cyber people need to understand it. Many or most of them involve egress and ingress, so safety folks, you need to understand how they work as well so that you can make sure people don't get locked in, if nothing else. So it's great practice for the future. And when you interview and someone talks about your experience with systems, you can go back and relate that you have done, in school at least, design on systems, and you have used them, and you understand the basic operation. So the project is a way for you to actually take something into a job interview. That's why I designed it that way. I wanted the seniors to leave here with something that they could say, you know, look, I've learned a lot of theory, and I understand how corporate security and homeland security should work, and I think you're well prepared there. I wanted you to take from this course one really defined skill, and that is the physical security and physical security systems especially, because it's something that novices generally don't take into the workplace. It's something you learn when you get there, and you might have a leg up if you know it. Finally, we're going to do a final paper. It's a chance to reflect and to improve the course. You're going to consider and voice ways that you can enhance the course for our future students. And I consider this an obligation to your future alma mater, Slippery Rock University, because you're going to tell me how I can do things better or differently for future courses, which makes future graduates even better. And when they get even better, they get even better jobs. And that just enhances the reputation of this department and this university. So it's an obligation for you to do this, in my opinion. So I hope you do it well. So I really harped on the project this term, because I think it's a way to apply the stuff that we talk about every week. And finally, you're getting to the point where you're going to turn in your final project. And if you did well on the midterm, then I'm sure you're going to do well on the final. The drawing, the scope document, and the budget are all due Sunday, May 3rd. Please submit those as 3 separate files if you can. I understand now, with the fact that we're all working from home, that you may not have the devices available, or you might not even have the bandwidth available to do that. I get it, but if you can, please put them in 3 separate files. That would be great. Anything submitted after May 3rd may be rejected. I have sole discretion on that. If you decide that you're not going to turn in your stuff on May 3rd, I can simply say, I'm sorry, I'm not accepting it after that. If I do decide to accept it because there's an acceptable excuse that you and I have talked about beforehand, you may get up to a 25% reduction in grade. The reason for that is that I have a time limit where I need to get grades done, and I have 2 major things to grade, a paper and a project, in the next 2 weeks. And there are 50 of you, so if you turn things in late, frankly, you're cramping my style, and I need to stay on task. So there may be a reduction if you turn things in late. The project is the most impactful grade of the term. It's worth 20 out of 100 points. So if you do well on it, certainly it raises you 2 full grade points. So if you think of it that way, if you had perfect scores on every quiz and everything else, then you'd be fine. You'd get a B if you didn't turn in your final, because you'd have it 80%. I don't know that there's anyone in that particular position right now, and if anybody is in that particular position where they've aced absolutely everything, I don't think they want to get a B. So this is the most impactful grade. It will, if you don't turn it in or if you do really poorly on it, it will knock you down several grade points. So please do your best work, make it clear, make it clean, Make sure that you do the scope document. I did receive more than one scope document that simply was sent to me. It was the original with no changes to, there was no description of what you'd done. It was the stuff that I gave you just sent back to me. And that will hurt you. So please make sure that your stuff is good, because it's really going to have big impact. So finally, we have the final paper. It's a reflection paper. Those of you who have had me before understand what that means, but let me go over it. It's a reflection on the course, what you learned, and how you'd improve the course. Okay? It needs to be an APA format, and those of you who have had me before know how much of a pain that can be, but as academics, it is required, and I know that you can all learn to do it if you've never done it before. The body of the paper, and you'll understand what the body of the paper is in APA format. It's the real writing of the paper can be no less than 600 words. I will count. If it's less than 600 words, expect to have significant points taken off for brevity. This is one of those things that I know people don't like word counts, but I don't want to get a one-page paper. That doesn't give me any information that I can use, nor does it give you any real reflective time on what you've learned and how you might use it. You must have some references from the course or from other sources. I would suggest that you would need at least 3 references in a paper of this length. One of them probably being the textbook. One of them could be one of the lectures, and then another one. But the textbook probably will be one of your references, I would think, but it doesn't have to be. And you don't have to reference the lectures, but you may only reference one of the lectures. And then a third. Doesn't mean you have to stick to 3. You can have more. You don't have to use the textbook, and you don't have to use the lectures, but I don't want to see all lectures, textbook, lecture. You need to go out and validate some of the things that you're talking about. So you got to find another reference there. Even if it's another reading that I assigned, right? One of those online readings is perfectly acceptable, but it can't be just the lecture. And make sure you understand how to cite those things. And the way you're going to do that is, well, I'll tell you in a second, but make sure you have a cover page. There's no abstract required. APA talks about an abstract. There's none required for this. If you want to do one, that's fine, but it's not required. References are. Let's talk a little bit about that paper. So, in an APA paper, you have a cover page. And there's a specific way a cover page is done in APA. It's got page numbering and a header in the right place. It's got your name. It's got the title of your paper and the university name. Nothing else. No date, not my name, those things at all. You'll do a course reflection. 2 things that you learn that you'll apply in your future job. What those things are, and you'll need to define them. So don't just say, I learned about biodigital systems and I'm going to use that. You need to tell me what that means. And then you'll tell me how you're going to apply that. Well, I think in a new building that I designed, I might use this or I might use that in this particular application perhaps. But there'll be 2 separate things. You'll do one thing that you learned and define it, and then how will you use it in your practice, and then do that again. Then you will do 1 or 2 things, it's up to you, that you would do to improve the course. Make them real, please. So you can't say, we need an in-person meeting, we need to meet every other week. This is an online course. And we accept that it's an online course, so that means it can meet no more than 20% not online. And in this particular course, which I've been invited to teach again, I can't fly into Pennsylvania every couple of weeks. I could, but my wife would probably reject the idea when she got my bill. So it's not going to happen. So try to make it meaningful and try to make it real. I don't insult easily. I was born and raised in New York, as you know. But be diplomatic about how you tell me you want to improve things. I don't say that because you're going to hurt my feelings. I say it because being diplomatic in your writing, when you're telling somebody how they should improve, is a skill set that you really should learn. And it's something that will do you a great deal of good in your future career. And that's why we're here, right? Get you jobs and to get you places to work where you're happy. So learning to be diplomatic. Learning to tell somebody where you don't like something that they've done in a diplomatic way so they don't feel like you're attacking them is a skill set. So I want you to practice that here. Again, I don't insult easily though. I think you'll be fine, but I just put it out there because it's something to practice. You'll then write a conclusion, which shouldn't be too long, 3-4 sentences, and then you have a separate page for your references, and there is a specific format for reference pages. So let's talk a little bit about that formatting, because that's what everybody gets all hung up on. So some of the hints on the formatting and the paper itself. Paragraphs are hugely important. We've gotten to be where with social media and posting things by phone, we tend to write everything in one paragraph and consider that to be a good piece of writing. It is not. If you have less than 9 paragraphs of at least 4 sentences, you're doing this thing wrong. If you think about it, you've got your introduction, which will be a paragraph. You've got 2 things that you have to at least tell me about and define, and then tell me how you're going to apply them. So there's 5 right there. You're going to talk about how you're going to improve the course. There's 1 or 2 right there. So now we're at 7, and you've got a conclusion. And my guess is that you will have at least 1 other paragraph in there somewhere because you're going to expound on something. Or you're going to use that to do another recommendation for improvement on the course. I'm not saying you're limited to 9 paragraphs. I'm saying if you try to turn this thing in with 3 or 4 paragraphs, it will not go well for you. So I would say 9. If you end up with 8, check yourself and see if you want to add to it somewhere. You may get away with it, but anything less than that, you're never going to meet the deliverables in this thing. Same thing if you don't go on to a 3rd page. So the APA sets standard fonts, font size, formats, margins on the paper, and essentially, because APA you'll notice says double spaced, you will fit somewhere around 250 words per page. Now, obviously the size of the word, right? But you'll notice if you do a word count on any page of APA writing, you will normally come in somewhere between 235 and 265. Almost guaranteed. It's just really what fits on the page at the right font. Which means that if you have 600 words in the body, you're going to go over onto a 3rd page, and there's no way around that, right? So if you end up with a page and a half or 2 pages and you're stretching it at the bottom, know that you're not going to meet the requirements, okay? I'm really going to be a stickler on the length of this paper because I don't want you to shortchange yourself on a reflective paper, okay? So here's a big hint for you. Purdue Online Writing Lab, or it's called Purdue OWL. Purdue University put out many years ago an APA, MLA, Chicago style, all the different writing styles used in academia. They put out a writing guide for it. Make sure if you go to their website, Purdue OWL, you put in Purdue OWL and then look for APA. Some of you may use MLA in other fields, papers you may have written, or even the Chicago style, which I don't think anybody in this group would have used, but perhaps. But certainly MLA may be something you use in the sciences. You're using APA. American Psychological Association wrote the rule book. And so click on the APA links, and it will show you samples of papers, how they're laid out, how you put the header in, and all that kind of good stuff. Okay? Use Purdue OWL. I just recommend it highly. You can go to other sites. You can try some of those online generators that will do an APA paper for you. I will tell you that I have looked at some of those when they come in, and I just scratch my head saying, if you don't know what an APA paper is supposed to look like, if you've never really done one from scratch, why would you trust a generator to do it for you and then find out what you turned in is completely wrong? Because many of those generators just aren't right. They're set up for use with certain browsers, with certain versions of Word, with other word processing programs, and they don't translate well. Never seen them do well. So write this one from scratch. Don't use one of those. You can try it if you want, but it's going to be a heartache. It's a first-person paper. So in this paper, you can say, I thought, and I found, I decided, I think, is whatever, right? This is an I paper. So first person makes it easier for most people to write. It's not a 3rd-person account. It's all about what you learned and how you might use it. But that's the basics for the paper. If you have questions about it, you need to contact me before finals week starts. Okay? So questions about the paper are due before finals week starts. Because once the final exam, which is what this is, starts, I'm not going to ask questions about the final exam. So this is your week to kind of lay the paper out. So this week, I'm considering it to be open season on catching up. And I don't do this in every course. So please, if you talk to other students, please don't tell them that, don't worry about Dr. Wisniewski. He'll open up stuff at the end. You can catch up on your work, because I don't normally do this. However, with the current situation, I think everybody could use a little bit of a break. And, if you want to take me up on it, then go right ahead. If you have not done work, if you have any open spots for things you have not turned in, you may turn those things in this week, ending May 3rd, for a 50% reduction in your grade. Now, that sounds terrible, but if you have a 0, 50 is pretty good, right? Because a 0 averages out much less than a 50%. So do yourself a favor. Go to the grading section in D2L, look at your report, and see if you have holes anywhere. If you have holes anywhere, you need to let me know if you want to turn those in, and I will accept them for a minimum 50% reduction. Of course, once it's graded, right? If you only end up with a 70% of the grade, then you're going to get 35, right? So it's 50% of what your final grade on that particular quiz or discussion or whatever it might be. So if you plan on doing that, I need you to let me know. Finish your projects, post them into the Dropbox for the projects. Make sure you do that by midnight, May 3rd, 11:59 p.m., Sunday, May 3rd. Okay? Start your paper. Start it just because you want to at least jot some things down, right? I don't mean you need to start writing it. Just start thinking about, wow, these are the things I really liked in the course, and use this particular lecture. Go back and look at the quick recap I did, just to jog your memory if you want. Or, better yet, all those PowerPoints that you printed out and you thought you did for nothing, they make a really good reference book for this paper. Go through and say, oh, yeah, I really like that. Circle a couple of things, right? And then start looking at APA style, and even start to lay out your APA style without any writing in it, so the backbone, the template for the paper is done, because that's the part that usually trips people up, but it's something you need to do. And then, of course, you need to call, write, text, whatever. I'm open to helping you, but you've got to reach out. There are a number of you who have reached out during the course of the semester to me, and I really appreciate that. I hope you do too. Talk to many of you over the telephone, because I think it's easier than texting back and forth. But I think those who have been in contact with me regularly are doing considerably better in the course than those who have not. That's an anecdotal thing, but I'm sure I could go get the data. So if you need help on something, this is the week. Again, I'm not going to take questions on the final paper in the final week. So if you have questions on that, get a hold of me. And then on your projects this week, you may ask questions about the project, but it's still due on Sunday. And so make sure you ask your questions early and often if you need help. So let me just go over that one more time. And I know a number of you are rolling your eyes saying, wow, he's really hitting home with this. But it's important because of the timing and the time that I have to report grades in the end. The paper, the final paper, is not going to be accepted until finals week. That is when the Dropbox opens and closes. Once submitted, your final paper is final. It's going to be locked. You'll get one opportunity to submit it. So submit your best work. You can't recall it or say, oops, I submitted the wrong one or whatever. I can't do that in finals week. I've got a lot of stuff to do, and I'm still going to be working my day job. So, let's be adults and be mature and get our best work in on time and the first time. If you want or need to discuss your current grade in the course, we have, passed now. Today, in fact, if you're viewing this on Monday, the 27th, is withdrawal date. If you plan on withdrawing from the course, you need to get with me on Monday, the 27th, because if you're hearing this later, it's too late. And that's been a published date of the university, so I'm sure you're all aware of that. But if you want to talk about your grades in general and what you should and should not do as far as catching up, I am willing to have those conversations, but we got to have them soon. Again, if you're doing any makeup work, please email me to tell me that it's either submitted or you're going to submit it, because some of the quizzes and things have been locked down for time. I'm not going to go in and open everything up again. I'm simply going to wait to see if somebody wants to do something, if somebody wants to submit something, I'll check to make sure that is open. But I'm not going to do busy work to go and open every assignment up again and then close it out again when everybody's done. That's just a lot of busy work. So you need to let me know if you're going to make up something. Send me an email saying, Dr. Wisniewski, I didn't do quiz number 3, and I'd like to do that, then I will go in and make sure quiz number 3 is open for you, tell you go ahead, you do quiz number 3, I grade it, and then I'll lock it down again. But there's some things that people just won't do again. And then there'll be one more short lecture to close the course, probably about a 10-minute job, if that. But if you need me, this is the week to contact me. So I look forward to hearing from you. Hope you've got everything clear, and if not, I'll be here to clear it up. Have a great week.